All right. Saludos from Miami. Thank you for joining us today, everyone. My name is Sheree Hansen. I'm one of the founders of the Cuba One Foundation. Cuba One was born out of and inspired by the reestablishment of diplomatic and business ties between the U.S. and Cuba. Cuba One Foundation offers a new generation of Cuban Americans the opportunity to go back to Cuba, build relationships with the Cuban people, and explore their heritage through high-impact trips to the island. By connecting to our roots, we can build bridges of cooperation, understanding, and unity among all people of Cuban heritage, regardless of where they may live. We're happy to host today's event alongside with 90 Miles Podcast, Cuba Educational Travel, the Center for Democracies in the Americas, the Cuba One Foundation, and the Cuban American Student Association at NYU, and Engage Cuba. At Cuba One, we work hard to build relationships between Cubans on and off the island. A central part of the work of that effort is connecting talented creatives in Cuba with their peers in the U.S. So we're incredibly happy today to be able to be joined by Onel, Adriana, Carlos, and Cristina, four incredible entrepreneurs from Cuba. This event takes place at an interesting and important moment for Cuban entrepreneurs and Cuba-U.S. relations. Recent changes in Cuba have expanded the private sector, and there are expectations that President Biden could change U.S. policy towards Cuba to the benefit of Cuban entrepreneurs. To moderate today's discussion, we're joined by Lisette Calvero. Lisette is a Latina digital entrepreneur living in New York City as an influencer marketing consultant to Fortune 500 brands, social media and content creators, and business coaches for influencers and personal brands. Her experience in the industry as an influencer has also been covered across national publications, including GMA, Good Morning America, Forbes, Business Insider, Cosmopolitan, and more. She's the founder of Influence with Impact, turning their social media presence to a profitable business with community impact. On Cuba One's inaugural trip, Lisette walked through the concrete suburbs of Alamán to meet her grandmother for the first time. Lisette has since led our third Cuba One trip as an alumni ambassador, has been a Cuba One champion, board member, y una hermana de alma. So I would like to invite all of you and invite Lisette to continue with our program today.
Thank you so much, Sheree, and thank you everyone for being here. Those words are so kind. You are truly una hermana de alma. And to be honest, if you asked me 5 years ago if I would be hosting a virtual panel with entrepreneurs from Cuba today, I would not have believed you. At the time that I first went in summer 2016, I remember finding the Wi-Fi card was like finding a gem. And I was just like, no way, we're on Zoom, we're here, we're doing the thing. So this is just so exciting. And I'm so thankful for the entrepreneurs that are here because I think these stories are so important. And quite frankly, visiting a lot of those small businesses when we were visiting was one of the most important parts of my trip. Like you mentioned, I visited summer 2016. I actually met my grandmother for the first time, which was really incredible because up until then, she was just photos and sometimes when we can connect over the phone. And I was able to connect with fellow young Cubans, including people like our speakers today, friendships that were so important to me up until this day, including daily DMs with our trip guide, Gretel, who was such an important connection I made from that trip. My travels to Cuba and the friendships that I built definitely helped me understand how much we have in common, especially the young Cubans and the Cuban Americans. And the path forward is through dialogue like this, through friendship, and through collaboration. And because of that, it's why I'm so honored to be here today, and I'm thrilled that we all get the opportunity to hear from our speakers. And don't worry, we will have lots of time to ask them questions, engage in this productive dialogue, and learn from them. Before we get started, I do want to mention a few housekeeping rules. You'll also find them in the chat by one of our panelists and moderators, Laura. And a couple of things to note is that this will be recorded and publicly shared, so keep that in mind in case you're asking a question that you are being recorded. When you're asking questions, please use the Q&A feature. If you're not familiar with Zoom, look down below. You will see two little bubbles. Q&A, you can click on that to submit your questions. Please make sure that you can also raise your hand, and one of our panelists will be able to unmute you and bring you into the webinar if you would prefer to ask your question live at the end of our introductions from our speakers. I also want to personally say that Spanglish is welcome, so if English is not your first language, just give us what you've got and I can do my best to translate, and I'm sure we can all understand each other. I will also encourage you all to use the hashtag CubansInBiz, that's CubansInBiz, and tag the sponsoring organizations on social media. If there's something that you learn here that you really loved, a panelist that you really enjoyed speaking or hearing from or asking a question to, there's nothing more valuable than tagging them and sharing their work on social so other people can learn from them too. So without further ado, let's get started. And I'd love to actually kick it off with Adriana, founder of Beyond Roots. Adriana, I really love how you have found a way to unite your passion for discovering and celebrating your roots with your entrepreneurial energy. Tell us a little bit more about your story.
Hi there. Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm super happy to be here today. My name is Adriana. I am from Havana and I'm 28 years old. I graduated from the economics faculty, and once I graduated, I decided to stay there as a teacher until last year that I decided just to be an entrepreneur full time. And actually that led me to my baby, Beyond Roots. I'm the CEO and founder of Beyond Roots, a company based here in Havana focused on promoting Afro-Cuban culture from different perspectives. We founded Beyond Roots on December of 2016 in a context marked by the increase of the number of tourists coming to Cuba since due to the flexibilization of the U.S. travel bans with the administration of Obama, and that created like a perfect framework for a lot of people in Cuba to start developing activities related to tourism. So we decided to jump in and we decided to start hosting different immersive and educated experiences for those people that were coming to Cuba and were having a real interest in learning about Afro-Cuban culture. So we find ourselves designing experiences about Afro-Cuban music, dance, culinary traditions, visual arts, religion, lifestyle, everything. And that's how we started. Then on September of 2019, we opened Beyond Roots as a physical space, being this one the first Afro-style store in Cuba, and a space where people can find from natural hair care products to accessories, clothing, souvenirs, and all kinds of different items related to Afro aesthetics and identity. And let me tell you something. Once we opened our store, we realized that a lot of people here in Cuba were considering Beyond Roots not only a store but also a community. They wanted to feel part of Beyond Roots community. And that led us to our third line of work, which is organizing events for people in Cuba that want to get connected with their roots and they want to feel proud about the way they look as African descendants. So basically that's the work we are doing. We have been actually growing very fast during the last years, and we have been growing very organically. Of course, as every entrepreneur, we have been dealing with a lot of challenge. Being an entrepreneur in Cuba, we still can consider that is something really new. So all the time we are learning in a very empiric way. You fall, but then you stand up and keep fighting. That's part of our way of being. The new context we are living right now opens a lot of opportunities for us. And of course, it brings also a lot of challenge. We need to recognize that the travel bans that came with strong administration plus the impacts that the pandemic had in the tourist area was really it was really bad for us since paralyzed completely the business model associated with the experiences, which was the most profitable part of our business, but also the one that was employing the highest amount of people in our team. But that made us to rethink everything and start creating new solutions, and we started targeting the Cuba market, and that unleashed a world of new opportunities. We discovered like a lot of different activities that we were able to start developing.
Thank you. Keep going.
Yeah. So in general now also I don't know, you should be aware that a list of prohibited activities was announced, and that opened also like a lot of opportunities finally for different entrepreneurs that have been operating with a lot of uncertainty, where right now we are actually able to know what you can do and what you can't do, which for us has been actually really tricky, because for one side we have been super excited because for the store that means so much. We have a lot of different opportunities. We can partner with a lot of people. We can even start produce different kind of products. But at the same time, now we have like a small concern with the part of the experiences, since being tourist guides is not approved with this list of activities that was announced. But hey, we are humans all the time. We are inventing new things. We are thinking beyond roots right now. We are redefining our strategy, and we are eager to. So we are gonna be okay.
Yes, and it's that spirit, I like to say, que resolvemos. That is the Cuban tagline, and it's so exciting to hear your story. I particularly love when you were talking about how Beyond Roots is beyond a business, it's a community. And I think that we'll probably see that common pattern from a lot of our panelists and a lot of our speakers here, where your business probably started as one idea and then it becomes a movement. So thank you so much for sharing that, Adriana. Let's now go to Carlos Gomez, founder of Guajiro Films. Carlos, it would be great if you could also tell us a little bit about yourself, the story of Guajiro Films, and how you're feeling about the private sector in Cuba these days.
Okay, thank you for this opportunity to everyone. My name is Carlos Gomez. I am CEO and founder of Guajiro Films, audiovisual production company founded in Havana in 2017. I was born in Bayamo, I am Guajiro, a small city in eastern of Cuba. I am journalist graduate and self-taught filmmaker. 5 years ago, I had to leave my family and friends behind to come to Havana and make my dreams come true. My dream is make movies. Like most migrant histories, mine was not easy. One of the aspects that affected me was the discrimination that exists toward the Guajiros, which is a way to refer to those people who are born outside of the big cities or simply in the fields of Cuba. Even in the dictionary of the Spanish language, defines us like rustic or shy people. At the same time, unfortunately, many Cubans and foreigners think that Cuba is only Havana. There are cars, the hill, el malecón, el morro. Luckily, after some time in the audiovisual sector, I started my venture creating a project that will help erase these geographical and social borders, allowing new filmmakers, musicians, entrepreneurs, and others access to new communication technologies and international standards. Through these contents show a more inclusive and varied look of Cuba. Sorry for my English, I try to perfect. About the name of Guajiros, I told you is an appropriation of the original word Guajiros with G, and another etymology that says that is how the American soldiers called the Cuban warriors during the war against Spain, the war heroes. Those are our origins and philosophy, because we believe that the heroes with W like this, we are honest, we are humble, we are talented, sensitive people, and the most important, we fight for our dreams. Now, I would like to show a little demo about our work. Laura? Soy guajiro, vengo del monte, lo mío me llega del agua allá, de la huella del horizonte, bajo el cimarrón de los montes, con los caracoles para la ciudad, se trajo el canto del sinsonte. Ale, 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 ala, y con los popoecu, ale, 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 ala, hacer yo vengo del monte, ale, 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 ala, achepa mi negro, ale, 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 ala, en la huella del horizonte, soy guajiro, vengo del monte, lo mío me llega del Tawaya, en la huella del horizonte, bajo el cimarrón de los montes, con los caracoles para la ciudad, se trajo el canto del sinsonte. Ale, 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 ala, y por los popoecu, ale, 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 ala. Thank you. Okay, it's okay. As a startup Guajiros, we have two fundamental arms. One is the provision of the production service, our main form of financing, and the social work, where we carry out to fulfill our main objective, which is to promote a more complete and varied vision of Cuba beyond the big cities. After these 4 years, and in the middle of this pandemic, we have supported more than 30 short films by new directors. We produce 5 feature films and more than 20 music videos throughout the country. Most of this production we did without a completely legal basis, but signs of the end of 2019, a new decree law coming to force legalizing the work of the filmmakers and formalizing the creation of independent producers. Luckily, Guajiro Films is one of these few that have been approved by the Ministry of Culture in Cuba, and today we already have several legal advantage. But we suffer from the possibility for inserting all materials in festival or monetizing in streaming platforms in the United States and in other countries due to embargo regulations, and even to acquire equipment for our work, because currently the no-use USA camera manufacturer has agreed to give us technical support for the fact of being in Cuba. But we continue to work. We recently joined to Summit Fellow programs, and soon we will be launching 2 new platforms to promote our brand and productions. Guajiro for Life magazine, and for promote the Cuban music streaming, we create Guajiro's Music. That is all I want to say. I hope my English, you all understand me.
It was perfect. Thank you so much for that. And I know I speak for a lot of people here. When you hear that music, when you see those visuals, it really just takes you back. And I think that that's just what's so beautiful about what you do. It's giving people these experiences even when you're not in Cuba. So, really, thank you for sharing that. And I really love how you're empowering the areas and individuals outside of Havana, and also want to give a shout out to Cuba One because they have truly taken people through different sides of the island, all the way from El Oriente to Pinar del Rio. And like you said, it's way more than Havana. Though we love Havana, it's important to see the rest of the island. So thank you so much for your work, Carlos.
Thank you.
Now let's turn it over to Cristina Figueroa, who is an art curator and runs Estéreo Figueroa Vives. Christina, we'd love to learn about your work and where you see challenges and opportunities going forward.
Hello, all, and thanks for having me and to invite me to this great initiative and with these great colleagues. And my name is Cristina Figueroa. I'm an art historian and art curator. I'm based in Havana, and I studied at the University of Havana. And I'm one of the founders of the Estudio Figueroa Vives, which is a family project started by my parents in the early 90s. They are both related to the art world. My father, he's a photographer. My mother, she's an art curator too. So I follow up her steps. And they both started this project in the early 90s, way before the private business were legally approved in Cuba. And since the beginning, we were focusing the promotion and the support of Cuban art and culture through exhibitions in our home. That is a home that we transform into a gallery and a studio, basically using all the spaces, even the bathrooms, were spaces destined for art. And one of part of our goals is, of course, make exhibitions, do research, research and promoting the artists' careers, and also giving lectures, and of course, receiving scholars or university students and exchange programs like Cuba Educational Travel, like Cuba One. So it's part of the project that we have been doing. But basically, our focus has been on making art projects with a social impact. So with this goal, since 2016, we opened to the public. So even though we started working before, we were doing more projects, more private projects, or more not so open to the public. But in 2016, we decided to make exhibitions open to the public. And since then, we have made more than 10 exhibitions with different topics. For example, we have made exhibitions about the lack of communication in Cuba, the internet access in Cuba, publicity, emprendedores, which is a word I can't pronounce in English, sorry. The new digital Cuba, among other topics, of course, Cuban contemporary art, a lot of historical background projects. But it's important to have in mind that to raise this project in Cuba since the beginning was a challenge because of this in-between situation that we have, because still today we are, what are we? We are a studio, we are a gallery. Still, this is one of the many activities that are not still, that's still prohibited in Cuba. So that's why we have to work in this limbo of promoting art, exhibiting art, but still we can't open up our wings, in a way to say it. So even though we have these huge opportunities right now, and we are trying to find these new spaces and where to fit, doing all these projects, we, in the terms of contemporary art, we are still missing support. So we are doing all these projects, and of course, 2020 was very complicated for us. The pandemic that affected all of us also affected art, culture, and how to promote and to protect the artists. So in this past year, and of course, these 2 months of 2021, which is, we are still in pandemic, our focus has been in how to support the artists and how to support art since this condition, the condition of not still having the opportunity to spread our business, but promoting through digital media has been very important for us. And also the social media, the different medias, Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook. So we have been using all different medias to show our work and to also in some way to promote the artists and the Cuban artists that we work with. I'm looking forward to receive your questions. I'm pretty sure you will have a lot of questions to us, and I'm really happy to answer all of them.
Thank you so much, Cristina. And I really love how your mission is to create social impact with art. And it reminds me so much about how a lot of us are now finding ways to use social media to create social impact. So it's almost like, how do we now put the two together in this new digital world, supporting art that's creating that impact and using social media as this platform? So I think that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Next, I want to go to Oniel Diaz, a founder of Ahue, a consulting firm specializing in the Cuban private sector since 2014, for a brief overview of entrepreneurship in Cuba and any recent changes. Oniel.
Hello everyone. I'm very happy for being here. For me, it's a great opportunity to share what we have been doing here in Cuba in the last 6 years, and also how the private sector has been changing during the recent years. AUGE is the consultancy to start the private business in Cuba. We offer our clients tailored services to overcome their challenges, expand their opportunities, and to turn their goals into reality. Since 2015, we work every day, and we want to believe that to contribute to the economic progress of our country. During all this time, we have been able to help so many entrepreneurs to start their business from the ground, and also to other entrepreneurs to find opportunities to improve their work and to win more space into the Cuban market. We have been able to work with almost all the kind of private business that right now exist in Cuba under the Cuentapropismo framework. Cuentapropismo is the word that the Cuban government created, instead calling us entrepreneur, because in a moment this was a so American word, and they decided to create this different word, which is Cuentapropista, and in the Cuban Spanish says who we are, all who we are. So we provide services such as market research, intelligence research. We organize events for our clients. We work on the communication consultancy. We work on design. We work on regulatory affairs. We try to give 30-60 degrees services to our client here in Cuba. Today, we also have become, in a certain way, reference for the Cuentapropista in order to understand how things are changing or evolving in Cuba, because we try to keep very updated on what the government is saying, assessing, thinking, and doing in order to be able to translate this in simple and plain words for all the Cuentapropista here in Cuba. And we usually publish some executive reports about all the new laws, the new regulation, and the new statements of the government regarding the private sector in Cuba. Having said that, I prefer to talk a little about what have been happening here in Cuba with the private sector in the last year after COVID. COVID has become a crisis, an economic crisis for all over the world, but specifically for our country, for Cuba. And COVID has created the conditions for the government in order to finally decide to make some movement regarding the private sector that they have been reluctant to do in the last 3 or 4 years. The private sector in Cuba started in 2010 with the economic reforms carried out by the Communist Party of Cuba, and the private sector began to grow until 2016-17, when the Cuban government decided to freeze the development of the private sector. It's a long story. Right now, to explain all of that, I can leave it for the question. But in general terms, in 2017, the Cuban government decided to stop the development of the private sector. And we had very, very difficult times also because of the Cuban politics of the Trump administration, the politics of the Trump administration regarding our country that has put a big price on all the private entrepreneurs, because we were the biggest or the most economical actor affected by this kind of policy. But in the last 2 years, the Cuban government, from 2018, the Cuban government decided to change with small steps the relationship with the private sector in order to disappear some of the prohibition that existed around us. And COVID came to create, or to finally create, the scenario that helped inside the government people that wanted to put forward reforms to convince the most orthodox people inside the government that was against this kind of reform. And right now, we are just leaving the new announcements of the Cuban government that have decided to open more space to the private sector. We just hear about some new measures with a big change, a crucial change that, in simple words, is that until now in Cuba, under the private sector, you were only able to do 124 activities that were listed on a regulation of the government that says very clear what you can do. But outside all of that was completely forbidden, and it was a big obstacle for the creativity and the development of the private sector. And right now, the government has said that they wanted to change that, and they have issued a list of forbidden activity, only 124 forbidden activities, and all the activities that are beyond that prohibition are completely allowed. There are more than 2,000 activities right now allowed to do for the cuenta propista, which clearly open the possibility for the development of the private sector. And for us in now, as the consulting firm in Cuba, to start a private business is a great opportunity. And right now we are receiving a lot of communication demands of service from our clients and other entrepreneurs that want to take advantage of this new scenario that has been created by the Cuban government. Some of you that might be listening might say, yes, but this was a very delayed decision. I'm okay with that. And right now there is not all the ideal conditions in the national economy for doing that. But I have to say that we might not have all the conditions, but this is the right moment to do it, because right now the national economy demand this kind of movement. So we are all very excited with what is happening right now regarding the private sector. They still have an opportunity for some professional activity that's still forbidden to push in order to get the authorization. The government has published that list without putting it into force. So we have around 1 month, 2 months to try to dialogue for the government and to push in order to obtain the authorization of this kind of activity. And I can give more details on the question. I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Oniel. I know that was very, very important context to understand what's going on with the private sector and where things are headed. Like Oniel said, and like the other panelists are able to do, remember there's the Q&A button down here where you can use it to submit your questions. We're seeing some questions in the chat. It'll be easier for us to track there because we're able to see in the order they came in. So feel free to move your questions over. Les voy a decir en español para los que están escuchando en otro idioma. Ahorita vamos a empezar a hacer preguntas a los panelistas. Si tienen algunas, usen el botón aquí abajo que dice Q&A, Q&A, y pueden ahí poner sus preguntas. Trataremos de traducirlo en inglés para los que estén escuchando, pero Spanglish está bien aquí. Hablen en el idioma que prefieran. And before we kind of open up to questions, something that Oniel, you made me think about is the word cuenta propista. It's really like por cuenta propia, right? So like taking ownership, doing business your way, which is such a powerful kind of idea. But I know, being a business owner, that it's really difficult to do that alone. So I just want to say thank you. And I think the business you have is so important, because navigating all of this, understanding the regulations, and as they're changing, is so difficult. It's hard enough to start a business. Now they have to learn this, right? So thank you for the work that you do. And I know that it's so appreciated. Before we go into the Q&A section, I do want to ask one myself. So one thing that I wrote down, hearing all of you speak, and feel free, any panelists, to jump in. I'm wondering, hearing all of your stories and all of your businesses, what are some things that people who are Cuban Americans, or maybe not even Cuban Americans, but don't have access to travel to Cuba right now, what can we do to support your businesses and to help move them forward? So maybe we'll start off with a few of the panelists I'm seeing here. I see Cristina first. Maybe each of the panelists, you can give your 2 cents. What can people do that aren't in Cuba right now to support the businesses you're working on?
Okay, so if you want me, I can start. I think the most important thing right now, if you can't do anything physically, then you can support by sharing, by learning, by knowing, and by understanding. I think that understanding is crucial right now. We have a lot of things going on, political, economical, physical, with also with health issues. But we are struggling, and we are, all of us, not only the 4 of us that are here today. I think I'm speaking of all the cuentapropistas or private business in Cuba. We are struggling to survive, and the best way that people abroad can support us is that they know that we exist, that they know that we are still working really hard, and sharing our content, sharing our work, and supporting us in this way of, if they see something wrong, they can connect with us and give us news and give us examples and helping us to improve in that way.
Thank you so much. O'Neill, you're next on my list. What can we do to support if we're not in Cuba right now?
Well, I think that supporting the private businesses in Cuba has a lot to do for supporting an approachment between Cuba and the United States. Of course, I think there is a lot of issues inside our country here in Cuba that must be solved by the Cubans that we live in Cuba right now, and also with the help, with the assistance of all the Cubans that lives abroad. But I think that Cubans that lives abroad, and mainly in the United States, the biggest help that can give us is to help to support an approachment between our 2 countries. A good relationship between Cuba and the United States that we saw during the Obama administration years was the best proof on how this good relationship can help and can be helpful for all of us here in Cuba in order to put our our businesses forward. So I will say that mainly this is the biggest help that we can receive right now, to support, to help that Cuba and the United States can have a different relationship. That it will be very helpful to see our brothers from abroad, our brothers and sisters from abroad traveling to Cuba, and also, of course, seeing Americans traveling freely to our country.
Thank you so much for that. Carlos, what can we do to support if we're not in Cuba right now?
Yes, I agree with Ornell and Cristina. We need everybody here share our histories. For me, it's very important that people know around the world. In Cuba, we are young people, and we have hope. This is important. In Cuba, we're working. In Cuba, we have dreams. We are young people with dreams, and we can make this dream reality and share another realities about our country, about our about the business in Cuba, about my generation, is very important for me.
Thank you. And Adriana, you're next.
I totally agree with my partners here. The best people can do and that people have been doing for us is just spreading the word about what's going on with entrepreneurship in Cuba, helping or pushing to get closer links between both countries. I think that's really the best way, because by stretching the relationship between both countries, we can have access not only for more tourists, but also for going there and have scholarship or fellowships to getting more understanding of how to be an entrepreneur and getting more understanding of these dynamics, but also more people know about the work you are doing, and then you keep growing and so on. So I think that spreading the word and connecting and supporting from abroad, when you talk about Cuba, the stories you share about Cuban entrepreneurs, that's awesome. And I say that from my particular experience. I have had the most amazing experience with Cuba One. Last February, I just received this a group of Afro-Cuban American, and that was life-changing for me. Literally, all of them have been dependent on what's going on with your roots, how can we help, how can I connect you with important people that can help you to keep growing your business. They have been supervising my marketing strategies. How can you go international? So that is a way of helping being out there.
Thank you. And that is a good reminder that, remember, you can take a photo of this, share a quote that you read, tag the entrepreneurs here, their businesses, the cuenta propistas, and you can use hashtag Cubans in Biz if you want to connect with the conversation. Panelists, I will ask you while I go in and look at the questions, drop in your social media handles or your website or your email if you want, and that way people can connect with you and go beyond the panel. So I will start with the first question that I see from Tonio. Hi, for entrepreneurs, did COVID change the way that you interact with your customers and potential customers? For example, Adriana, would you consider doing a virtual tour? So I'll start with you, Adriana. Would you consider doing a virtual tour? And then any other panelists, just let me know if you want to jump in and answer the question. How has COVID changed the way you interact with customers?
Well, I think that's actually a really good question. Of course, we have been trying to save that part of your roots. Unfortunately, internet connection is actually not so good in Cuba. Mainly, we offer our experiences on Airbnb, and Airbnb started this idea of the virtual experiences, but then they were not available on Cuba because the internet connection was not reliable. So we at the end decided to just stop there. We started a campaign of Beyond Roots going international, and we decided to stay connected with our followers from abroad by trying to sell some of our t-shirts and souvenirs in the United States. So that's the way we found to keep that connection with them, and at the same time we reinvent ourselves and started just producing for the Cuba market, and we started developing even more the store. Related to our events, also changed completely our dynamics. We used to host different events for the community with fashion shows, free photography sessions for people. We were teaching people how to treat their natural hair. We were teaching moms how to deal with kids' natural hair without having chemical treatments on them. We were also making tutorials of how to wear a turban. We were trying to rescue our roots, and that was something massive actually here in Havana. We were receiving so many people in every event we were hosting, but then with the COVID, that changed. And we reinvent ourselves, and we started moving all that to the social media. We started creating Facebook groups and events in Telegram or in WhatsApp. We were just going to the online conference. So that's basically how we have been trying to live with this pandemic, which have actually actually unleash our creative potential.
Thank you for sharing that. And I also want to mention Toño is a Cuba One alumni, and he was able to go on a trip where he was able to interact with Beyond Roots. So thank you for that. And Carlos, it looks like you want to answer this question. Jump in.
Yes, in our case, we had to change all our technicals or way to work or films because with the pandemic on set in a film we cannot have more than 10 people on set, and at the same time we need to change the way to put on screen the movies. And in Cuba, that was too difficult because internet in Cuba is complicated, and right now we're working for digital platforms. And right now, too many Cubans don't look or maybe or work. That was very difficult for us, but we tried to put our productions in el paquete, the package. I hope you know about that. This is another way to make our work.
Wow, and you just reminded me, El Paquete was the coolest thing I discovered when I went in 2016. I was like, this is better than Netflix. What is going on? How are you able to do this? It's incredible. So if you haven't looked it up, please do so. El Paquete is just like way cooler than anything we've invented here. Cristina, you can unmute.
Yes, I'm here. Yes, I wanted to refer to the question about what we were doing during this pandemic to engage with our potential visitors or clients. And in the case of art, I would like to point out that to consume visual art through social media is quite a challenge. It's even more difficult because you lost the touch of touching a painting, watching a sculpture, attending to a performance, and so you have to experience everything through these cameras and through the screens. And during this pandemic, we needed to do it. And what we did was to make studio visits to the artists live and doing videos, and in that way to share what they were doing during the isolation moment. They were still painting, they were still doing sculptures, installations, research, and what we did was that in order to go inside the artist studios and to expose it in our social media. And one funny thing about the El Paquete, of course, for us was breakthrough for information. And in fact, we did an exhibition about El Paquete. And the day of the opening, we invite some paqueteros to be there, to attend, and to copy El Paquete to everybody who wanted to copy it. And one day we received a visitor to our studio who was a producer from HBO. And when he saw the exhibition about El Paquete, he told us, well, I've heard that my series, I can't remember the name of the series, but I heard that my series is in El Paquete, and I told him, well, let's check it out. And I checked in El Paquete, actually was there, and he was freaking out. He was crazy. He loved it. He said, well, in the US, I will sue you, but in Cuba, I totally support it. So that's part of the love of what we're doing from Cuba.
I remember when I went, Game of Thrones was still major, and y'all, El Paquete had Game of Thrones last episode like the next day. I was like, I don't even have access. So it was so cool. Another example of Resolvemos. And actually, this next question is for you, Cristina, so we'll have you on the screen. Can you explain a little bit more about how the new Cuban laws are affecting business? Are there any specific prohibitions that you have had to work around?
Oniel was explaining before about these new 2000 activities that open up, and there are like 127 or 124, I can't remember, but I think it's 127 activities that are still not approved. that we still have to fight for their to be legal. And one of the activities that is not approved is to have a private art gallery. So, of course, that affects me and our family directly because we are an art studio. We support Cuban art, Cuban culture, Cuban artists, and we exhibit art of in our studio. But it's an art studio. It's not an art gallery. So it's important to have this definition because we only can do what we do and to promote Cuban culture because we are an art studio. And that, of course, limitates myself because I can't, as I was telling before, I can't expand my wings. I can't decide, okay, well, maybe my next step will be that I want to have an art gallery. I want to be open to the public to participate in art fairs, to sell the work of the artists, and to have my website that we actually have, but it's a website for an art studio, not for a gallery. So, and if you look closely to these different activities that are prohibited, are basically the activities that are related with communication, that are related with information, and in some way that you realize that, of course, art is a tool, is for information, is very powerful. It's a very powerful tool for information, and that's why it's important for the government to still have it under control. So, of course, right now we are gonna still working the same way we are doing, doing something that we can and avoiding the other things that we can't do.
Thank you. Oniel, is there anything you want to add to that? Curious just about the art space in general. Any thoughts there?
I think Christina has explained very well the current situation regarding the art galleries. Personally, for me, it was a surprise finding this activity on the forbidden list because I remember very well when 2 years ago when the cultural industry in Cuba was kind of upset with the 349 decree law, which was a regulation that put some limitations for the entertainment and the arts here in Cuba and in the private spaces. The Ministry of Culture went to the TV to talk about this decree law, and he clearly stated, I have been talking with some colleagues, and all of them reminds that very well. He clearly stated that the government was assessing how to finally fix the situation of the private art galleries. So for me, it was kind of unexpected news to see that finally these private galleries was finally allowed. But I didn't find this in this forbidden list. Unfortunately, the art gallery remains in this forbidden list. And for me, it might be a lot. It might be very related with the current situation in the country, with what has been happening in the last 2-3 months with the cultural sector, with the artists, and the government decided, on my opinion, a bad decision to postpone once again a decision in finding what to do with the private art galleries. But 3 days ago, when the government went again on TV to explain this new regulation for the cuentapropismo that we are explaining here right now, the Minister of Work, which is the department of the government that take care of all the cuentapropismo, says that the Ministry of Culture is, let's say again, is assessing a way to finally find a solution for the private art galleries. But until now, we don't have any news about it. I think that this next 1 or 2 months that we still have the opportunity to push for the legalization of some activities are crucial. The government, as I said, decided to publish this list without putting it into force. So they gave us a time to criticize, to talk about it, to push for it. And I think that the private galleries is one of the activities on this forbidden list that must be allowed, because they finally existed in the last years. They are there. You cannot ignore them. And I think that the solution is to try to find a space for them in our country.
Thank you for that. That's super important in context as well. Carlos, I see your hand raised. Please add in.
Yeah, because it's not only in the galleries, in the audiovisual, we have a big problem too, and especially here in Guajiro Film, because we work with self-taught filmmakers, and now it's provided. If you are not a member of the Cuban Cinematographic Register, you cannot produce any music film, any films. And in Guajiro, we're working with these self-taught filmmakers. How we can support these new filmmakers if they don't have any legal way to make movies or make a curriculum to be part of this register. It's complicated. I hope they find a solution for that.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, because I think it's important for us to understand the nuances, right? All these little things that are affecting the big picture, your big business, big picture of your business. So thank you for that. Lupe Torres, you have your hand raised. If you would like, we can have you ask the question live to our panelists. Well, we can wait and have you in. I don't know, Lupe, if you're here, you can drop us in the chat if maybe you're trying to come on, but we're happy to ask your question live. In the meantime, we have a question for Adriana. Can you tell us more about the events that you have that are going to engage the Beyond Roots local community?
Okay, so once we opened the store, we realized that the problem was not only that people didn't have a space to find the kind of products we were offering, but also that we were lacking a culture or Afro aesthetics. Since we are kids, usually we are taught that we need to have like straight hair, that's the right way to look pretty or professional. But no one tells you that by being natural, you can also be professional, that the way you look as African descendant is the right way. So it happened to us that a lot of people were coming to the store trying to find just knowledge, trying to feel part of a community of support. They were having these amazing stories. They were telling me like, okay, I want to take a step forward and decide to be natural, but my family is not supporting me, or I feel completely lost, or I feel that everyone is look at me bad at my work. So that gave us the idea of start creating this community, and that's what led us to host the events. So there are a lot of different projects in Cuba working with the Afro aesthetics and identity, and we decided to unite it, most of them, and start hosting the event. So basically, it's a one-day event where we have, as I was saying before, fashion shows, but also we host workshops about defining your course, or we have talks about what is the meaning of being a black girl, for instance, in Cuba in 21st century, or how do you feel by having your natural hair. We also have a free session of photography for kids that sometimes don't have the opportunity to have this kind of photography in their life, or they are quinceañeras and they need to take the decision of, okay, I'm gonna be quinceañera, do I straighten my hair or can I be natural? So we make pictures of them and then we promote those pictures in social media, in that way they feel empowered and they feel pretty, and we create a reference for black people that can be feeling in the same way. At the same time, we have hip hop concerts because the idea is to create content about the music, and then we have people making dreadlocks or braids. We have like a lot of different things going on during the whole day. So basically, those events that we host are free. and we used to do it. We used to do them every 3 months before the pandemic. Right now, as I was saying, we just moved to the social media and we are just bringing experts to talk about hair or to talk about the history of turbans or just to talk about how do you feel as a female, as a black female, from a psychological point of view. So these basically are the kind of events we host for the community.
That is so incredible. And what I think is beautiful is that, at least from what I see on social media in the Latino community, in the Black community, there's a big call for natural hair right now and feeling comfortable in your skin. And to see that it's also happening in Cuba, again, like we are all on the same team, different islands, a big island here, a small island there. So I love to hear that. I think that's such a beautiful movement. Thank you for doing that. Carlos,
Thank you.
yeah, we have a question for you from Leilani, who is actually an alum of a Cuba One trip. She's also the founder of Candela Amplifying. Carlos, the question is, curious to know more about the platforms that Guajiro Films is working on to support Cuban artists. So want to hear about your different platforms.
Yeah, about our platform right now is the same platform of the artists. We don't have, we're trying to support the artists in the platforms, all platforms, not in all platforms. I don't know if you understand. We try right now to work in YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, but principally in YouTube. But the problem in YouTube is we don't have a big support for monetizing, recover, or invest or inversion in these platforms. But the most important right now is YouTube. We try to talk with Google. Maybe we can change the way to work with them, because right now it's impossible open account, monetizing account in this platform.
Yeah, and that's something I didn't really even think about, because a lot of content creators in the States, you can monetize by just making content, putting it online. You get paid for your views. You can get paid by brands, and that's something that your artists aren't able to do, which I think is just very important. So I really do hope that there's a workaround on that. Thank you for that. There's a question for Oniel. Can foreign, non-US based investors invest as ANGE? Maybe that's how you pronounce it. Investors in Cuban small businesses. Any thoughts on foreign, non-US based investors?
Well, until now, they cannot. Not only non-US based, but also US based person cannot invest in Cuba. Not only because of the blockade embargo in the case of the United States, but also because the Cuban regulation doesn't allow this kind of participation of foreigners with the entrepreneurs in their private businesses. Until now, it's not allowed. I think this is one of the weak spots of this new strategy towards the private sector. It's okay. It's a historic step, opening the private sector in the way the Cuban government wants to open it. Even if we take into consideration this activity that has been forbidden, but there is infinite possibilities right now. But there are some weak spots on the strategy, and one of them is this one. There is right now no way to access to funds in order to support these new businesses that will start, and also the already existing businesses that right now in the middle of this situation need funds in order to survive or in order to increase their activities. And you cannot access to this kind of funds. Inside of Cuba, you cannot, because there is a small mechanism of giving credits to Cuban banks, state-owned Cuban banks, but it's very unflexible and small mechanism that has been working in the last years, but it still have a lot to improve in order to be the right way to obtain funds. But I think the easiest way, the most fast way, will be exactly allowing Cubans living abroad and also foreigners getting involved with private businesses here in Cuba, supporting the private businesses with investment, such as angel investors or other kind of actors that can give this kind of funds. But right now, it's not allowed, unfortunately.
Thank you. And I know a lot of others asked similar questions to that on investments. Is there anything else that you think people could do, from maybe donation-based ways to get involved? Curious about that because I'm seeing similar questions about supporting financially.
Well, I am a consultant. I run a consulting firm, and when you talk about financing or giving money to another person or to another business, you must secure that you are doing it on a legal way. And I have to finally came back to what I was saying. There is no legal way for doing this, to fund, to donate, to give money. You can try and do it on a personal basis, but we're talking about businesses, and so I think you should always secure a legal way of doing this in order to not get in trouble here in Cuba or abroad. And I have to say it again, here in Cuba, it's not allowed until now. I think we will have to wait, for example, to the authorization to the small and business enterprises, which is the next step that the Cuban government will do. And they just said 3 days ago that they will fulfill this promise, they will fulfill it. And I expect that it will be fulfilled this year, not next year or 2022. This will be this year. And we will have to wait when the moment comes to authorize the small and medium enterprises, the private small and medium enterprises, if the government finally will create a way in order to fund these companies with foreign investment or money coming from Cuban living abroad.
That's great. Thank you for that update, and thank you for that clarification. Like you're saying, the legal way, you don't want to get in trouble on either side wherever you are, or put any of these businesses at risk. Thank you. Next question from Molly Lehman. How can U.S. tour companies connect with more Cuban entrepreneurs to support when travelers start going back down? So any panelists, if you have experiences working with U.S. tour groups, how can they connect with you once people are traveling again?
Well, it's me again.
Go ahead.
No, Adriana.
Adriana, yeah, you have your hand raised.
Go ahead.
Okay, so we have had actually a lot of experiences working with different travel groups, and they can reach you through social media and or through mail, and from that start the relationship. Right now, the main interrogant is that it seems that being tourist guide is on the list of prohibited activities. So we are hoping, since that list is not like permanent yet, it just was announced as you can change. We still think that maybe tourist guide is removed of the list. But actually, yes. A lot of the companies that work with Beyond Roots, they reach us through social media, they reach us through Instagram, and then we start to pay like, let's say, like gathering tours according to the characteristics of each group we are receiving, or depending on the interest they have. Again, for first time, for instance, even though Beyond Roots only operates here in Havana, with Cuba One, we took the experience. It was also an experience for us, and we went to Santiago de Cuba to explore Afro-Cuban spirituality and identity there. So yes, basically, a lot of colleagues that also work with students and so on, we are really open to receive requests and so on, and to work with all these travel companies to provide like the best experience.
Thank you.
Cristina,
Cristina, come on in.
No, I think Adriana explained it very well. But in our case, we always say that the best way to experience Cuban art and culture is to come here, physically. To experience the same effort, the same problems, and to suffer like us, and at the same time to have the same happiness that we have by experiencing. And in our case, of course, as soon as everything opens up, we are going to continue working with universities and working with museums and with projects like Cuba One, like CDA, like Cuba Educational Travels, that are always bringing very important and very highly and important curated groups to Cuba, because I think that's important, to focus the interest of the people who are traveling to Cuba, to focus on who to meet in Cuba. But right now we have people that are writing to us like, oh my God, we're wishing to come back to Cuba. We are just waiting for this. In the case of the U.S., we're waiting for this embargo. In the case of the rest of the world, we are waiting for the pandemic to stop and to go back to Cuba to experience physically with all of us and with all of you, like they say.
Thank you. Another good question. Do Cuban entrepreneurs have a framework to discuss their problems, make themselves heard? Essentially, the question is, how do Cubans, and especially young Cubans, get together to demand legislative change? What are some things that people can do to get involved on a political level in, productive discussion to try to make laws? If anyone wants to. Carlos, come on in.
Yeah, like entrepreneur, we don't have that way. I don't know why, but we don't have that way. But like artists is different. In my case, in audiovisual and movies, we can talk with cultural institutions all the time for talk about all the problems with the Cuban film production, or for example, this problem with the new regulations. We talk with the ICAIC, is the Cuban cinematographic industry. There was the first cultural institution put online one declaration talking about the new regulations. That is important. We talk all the time with these cultural institutions.
Thank you for sharing that. And if any other panelists want to jump in, a similar question was, how is the relationship and communication between cuentapropistas, entrepreneurs, and the Cuban government? Oniel, do you want to jump in? I see you on mute.
Yeah. Well, I think this framework is under construction right now. You have to take into consideration that the relationship between the Cuban government and the private sector has been a relationship with different periods, with different moments. And I think that, let's say, the time between 2010 and 2018, when the private sector emerged in the last 10 years until 2018, when this new presidency of the country took come into power, that was very hard years, let's call it that way, in terms of that the government didn't really understand us, or really didn't gave us the right space into the national economy, because in those moments there was a lot of limitations and regulation that were completely nonsenses, and there was mainly no chance or opportunity to set up a dialogue in order to improve that regulation. I remember very well, I was mentioning it before, when in 2017 the government decided to start a process that they called perfeccionamiento del trabajo por cuenta propia, and basically it was a set of regulations that were aimed to completely froze the development of the private sector. Among other prohibitions, there was one that was very harmful for us, and they was putting into force that no cuentapropista was allowed to have more than one license, which was a crazy idea, and also an idea that had a big potential of harming cuentapropistas, because there was a lot of us that had not only one, but 2 or 3 or 4 licenses in order to have more businesses and in order to be able to work on several areas at the same time. And all of that was during those first 8 years of this history since 2010. But even in that moment, for example, I had the opportunity to write a letter with 42 colleagues of mine, and we sent it to the government in that moment, saying that we didn't agree with this decision of making this perfeccionamiento de trabajo por cuenta propia, and we clearly state that it will be harming the private sector. And we asked the government that if they really wanted to change the private sector for good, they had, for example, to allow us to import and export directly or even through a state-owned company. If they really wanted to help the private sector or to put an order to the private sector, we expected for them to see for a list of forbidden activity and not a list of allowed activities. And we made a lot of recommendation that with a lot of satisfaction right now we're seeing that they are becoming to transform into reality. Right now, all of that we asked in our letter 4 or 5 years ago are becoming a reality right now, and the government is moving toward that direction, with contradictions, with some prohibition that's still completely illogical, but the general direction of this movement is forward. So I think this framework is under construction, and I want to say that because there was a breaking point, in my opinion, that was the tornado that hit Havana 2 or 3 years ago. I didn't remember very well. I think it was 2 years ago, a tornado that hit Havana and some part of this city, and it was a devastating tornado. And in that moment, the government saw how the private sector went to these affected areas in order to help people, to supply or to provide food, or to help, or to say, okay, I'm here with you because I want to help people. I am part of this country, and I want to be part of the solution. And that moment, even if the government in the first moment didn't completely understand very well how the private sector went to the neighborhoods to help people that were damaged by the tornado, that was the first moment when the government saw the potential of the private sector in order to impact in the society and to help them to solve some problem. And we saw that again on a bigger scale with COVID. And it has become widely known that even the government have said very clear in television, in the medias, we saw the private sector participating with us, trying to solve the problems, to help in the neighborhoods, to try to help people that were suffering COVID right now, and they need help in this economical crisis that we are all living. So the reality has become more visible for them, and we are also taking more spaces. The social networks are also crucial in order to set up an agenda and to put clearly in white our disagreement towards the policy of the government regarding the private sector. And I think the government is starting every day more and more to look to the social network to make politics regarding the private sector. And I saw how in certain moments they are using what colleagues of mine and people from the entrepreneurship community in Havana are saying on the network, and they are taking that into consideration in order to design new policies. Not, let's say, a happy ending history. Is under construction. We are in the middle of that process, but I think that the trend is forward, and we have to participate on that trend.
Thank you for that. I'm seeing a few questions about different industries, and I think it could be very interesting to talk about a few of them. There is a question about, is it legal, is it possible to develop mobile applications? For example, ride hailing for taxis like Uber in the US? Of course, not Uber going to Cuba, but could people make an app like that, or delivery of food, etc.? What are your thoughts on that? Developing apps?
Well, it will be completely legal with these new regulations that we were talking about. But the most important thing that is that already this kind of application exists. We don't need Uber in Cuba because we have Bahanda, which is a Cuban app that has been developed by Cuban entrepreneurs, and I can mention all others apps, Cuban apps that gave this kind of services and also delivery services. You can find, for example, Mandao, which is a very well-known app right now here in Cuba, in Havana, that help restaurants and cafeterias to deliver the food directly to home. It was an app that take in their both hand the opportunities that came with COVID regarding with the needs of delivery services. And Mandao is also a good example. So my answer is yes, they will be legal, but they already exist, and they were businesses like others that had find the gaps in the current regulation for the private sector that right now will disappear, and we will have a better regulation, but they find the gaps, and they decided also to take the risk taking forward these kind of businesses. And right now they are gathering the fruits of their efforts during these last 2 or 3 years. For them, there will be a new scenario with this regulation, and I think we will see more and more applications, apps of this kind coming into light in Cuba because of the new regulation, and also because of the internet that we are that is present in the Cuban scenario since 2018. I returned to that year. 2018 was a crucial year for all what is happening here in Cuba, not only in economy but also in politics, also in social in the social subjects of what we are seeing right now here in our country.
Thank you. And if any other panelists, if there's anything new that has come up in your industry that you want to share with us, maybe new technologies, new ways of doing something, please go ahead.
Sorry, Lisa, can you repeat the question?
Yeah. If there's anyone who wants to mention any other technology that is new for them in their industry, so I know, like, for example, Cristina was talking about doing tours virtually, so different things like that, which I just think is interesting. Again, a new way of doing business. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I would just make a short comment about this. Maybe it's not a new technology, but it's a good example of how Cuban entrepreneurs adapt to this situation we are living after COVID. If you go right now to Instagram, and this is completely new, it's a new situation in the last, 10 months. If you go to Instagram, you will find dozens and dozens of new businesses, private businesses, really small private businesses carried out by Cubans and aiming to the most basic and simple needs of Cubans right now. That might be, let's say, food, for example, or beauty products that right now there is a shortage of this kind of product. Well, almost there is a big shortage of everything right now, but these two products or family products that are basic products, let's call it right now, you will find a lot of new businesses in Instagram that they are just started from the ground on their own houses with no facilities at all, with no big investment, but they decided to take the opportunity of this scarcity, and they have one ability. They feel that they can provide this kind of good, and they decided to go forward. And right now they are making a lot of connection between them, between all these small businesses, and they are making connection with people doing delivery activities in Havana and all over the country. And this is a good symbol, a good example of how people adapt and how people are using the technologies to overcome the difficulties that we are facing right now. There was just, we had just in Havana 3 or 2 months ago a big show in Estudio 50 of private businesses that started during the pandemic, during the COVID-19. Estudio 50 is a huge facility. It's very big, and it was completely full of people doing very interesting and good things. And that's the best example of our potential and what we can give to this country.
Thank you. Carlos, jump in.
Yeah, another way, in our case, is exchange service. For example, we know these girls, the name is Las Frescas. They make natural, cook with natural food, and that's great. And I filmed a video for them, and they put the food in my filmations. This is like exchange of service. In Cuba, we have a competitive company, but the competition is not equal like another countries or another realities. This is our experience.
Thank you. Adriana.
So I just wanted to add that also we have been experiencing a boom with online payments. Now we have this app which is Transfer Mobile or Zona, and a lot of Cubans we are getting used to process online payments. It's very common that I see now that my customers in the store, they prefer just to, I will transfer you the money, and they are not using so much as we used to use in the past, the cash. And this is also a result of the pandemic. Many people were not wanting to go to ITM and touching buttons with all this thing of the COVID. So we have been experiencing a boom with the financial transaction, with the delivery system. I think that delivery is something that came to stay. Is part of the new reality of many entrepreneurs, and this is something that is actually a result of the pandemic. So instead of just going to the physical space as it used to happen in the past, a lot of people is just texting you like, "Can you bring please the product home to me?" And this is revolutionary for me in Cuba. And then you also seeing, like as Onia was saying, in Instagram you find like so many kind of different businesses that were born during the pandemic, but also you find on WhatsApp a lot of sale groups like cash sales on WhatsApp in Cuba. So you find that different entrepreneurs are just moderating these kind of groups of sales and buy, and it's functioning really organized. And then you find like a lot of virtual community, and that's helping a lot because it's part of the behavior of our business right now. And in the other side, and it's related to the previous question, also you find a lot of channels where entrepreneurs we stay connected, even though we don't have an institution that connect all entrepreneurs. We are in different WhatsApp groups, and then we share what we are worried of, or we share a lot of contacts of suppliers, or we put different courses there of marketing or new technologies or whatever you may need on your business. So, and then we have common positions in front of the topics. So we have been creating our own channels. We entrepreneurs we are getting organized. We are getting together, and then we project the same message, or we try to project the same message in social media in the way the government perceive. That is the same feeling. Most of the time we can analyze all that through O'Neill. But yeah, it's the idea.
That is so cool. I know that there's so many spaces like that here too, right? Like Facebook groups where people are sharing tips, and it's like you're all building these communities on WhatsApp, which is so cool. You have to sneak me in. I'd love to drop a tip. So just to do a quick time check, we're going to answer just a few more questions and wrap up. I did mark a question from Joelle. Curious about your feeling of workers in the private sector joining a union. So a labor union. Has anyone been talking about that. Tell us your thoughts, especially anyone in the arts fields as well. Cristina.
Well, do you hear me? Okay, that's a tricky question because unions in Cuba are organized by the government. In terms of, for example, I'm an art historian and curator, so I'm part of the UNIACT, which is the National Union for Artists and Writers of Cuba. In the case of Carlos, maybe he's part of the Union of Filmmakers. In terms of art, it's complicated. Especially there was a big discussion like a couple of months ago about the union about the filmmakers wanting to create a union for them, to in order to support themselves and to fight for their rights. And right now, it's not possible. Right now, what we can do is to exchange our criteria between each other and to support between each other, but we cannot create a union specifically for all of our different areas or fields of work. It's my experience in terms of art. In terms of art, it's not possible right now. I'm not sure if Carlos has another thing to add.
Carlos, come on in.
Yeah, for example, in the last 3 weeks, the Cuban actors tried to create a union for the actors, and the end of the conversations was good, because right now we have some problems in the conversation with the Cuban Culture Ministry, with the young artists. The end was good, but they tried. And in the first moment, the Cuban Culture Ministry said yes, and they tried to create this union for actors. But it's necessary talk about it between the both sectors. And right now, it's very complicated. Sit the both sides and talk about the interests of the government and the actors, the filmmakers, everything.
Thank you. And just take a quick time check. We are going to wrap up shortly. Thank you to everyone who's been here. Muchas gracias a todos los que vinieron y escucharon y todo el apoyo. We are going to ask one more question to our panelists, so please stick around, and then we're going to do a quick closing. There have been questions about the recording and social channels, so you can continue to support them. We put some social channels in the chat, but we will send them to you via email as well, so you can continue to engage. If your question was not answered, please support them on social media, and you can engage in dialogue in that way. We definitely want this conversation to keep going. Now, my last question, and I believe Cristina said this, and it impacted me a lot. It was that we can support by sharing, knowing, and understanding. So I would love to ask each panelist in a minute or less, so really quickly, what is one thing you hope people who are not living in Cuba know or understand about your experiences as a Cuban entrepreneur? Cristina, you're first on my list, so you'll go first.
So I will go with the same. Yes, it's important for people who are not living in Cuba that the first thing is to be in touch with us and to understand us and to trust that we are giving the best of us, the best that we can. We are doing it because you have to take in mind that we are people who have decided to stay in Cuba and to go forward and to make an impact, maybe a big impact, maybe a small impact, but it's still an impact. And the sole thing that we exist and that we are here fighting for our rights and fighting for a right of existence is the most important thing of all. And I will have to say yes, supporting, learning, studying, writing, reading, and knowing everything about us is what is important right now. And once that they can have more access, of course, they're all welcome to join us, to support us in all the different ways that they can support us. We are going to be very happy.
Thank you. Adriana, you're next on my list. What is one thing you wish people will know or understand about your experience as a Cuban entrepreneur?
Okay. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I will say that as an entrepreneur, I would love you to know that we are fighters, and that's something that I say all the time. And we are fighting for like a better Cuba, a more productive Cuba, a more positive and developed country. And this is one of the main ideas that we try to keep in everyone's mind. And actually, what we need here, as Cristina said, we are here. We decided to stay here, and we won't stop fighting for what we love, for what we are creating. So acknowledge that and support Cuban entrepreneurs by spreading like a positive message, by trying to strengthen relationship between both countries, because actually I think that that will make a difference.
Thank you. That was so beautiful. O'Neill, you're next. What's one thing you want people to know or understand about your experiences?
Well, I will basically expect respect. Respect mainly from our countrymen, because sometimes our countrymen living abroad, and for example in cities such as Miami, sometimes when I had the wonderful opportunity to go to the United States and to visit Miami, I have been talking with countrymen, with people from our country, and when it comes to the moment to explain what we are doing in Cuba, they always want to underestimate what we are doing. They maybe listen to you in the first minute, but after that, okay, yeah, but what you're doing not so big. Come here to the United States. This is a great country, and here you will have more opportunities. And what we expect is basically respect of what we are doing here. I don't think we are more brave than any Cubans. To go abroad and start from the ground, you have to be very brave. But also to stay here in Cuba, you have to be brave, because they both have one thing in common: is to fight for what you really believe and what you really want for your life. So that deserves respect, wherever you're living, in this side, in this part in Cuba, or living abroad. So I will expect respect, and that they truly believe that we are bigger than any obstacle that we are really facing here in our country.
Thank you. I totally hear you on that. Someone who comes from Miami, I'm like, every story is difficult, so respecting for both is very important. Carlos, you are next and last on my list.
Yes, it's complicated with the last right now after all. Okay, I think the most important is everybody here spread the voice, spread our histories, the history about we exist. We are young Cuban people. We have dreams. We working. We fight for our dreams, and not only us. Too many young people and non young people too have dreams and fight for these dreams and for change our realities. This is important, and it's important everybody on the world know about Cuba. It's not only political problems, it's not only communist country. It's a country with problems, with the own reality. We exist here and we fight here.
Thank you. And before we go, I want to quickly introduce and bring someone to the stage to give some final remarks. So we're going to have Maria Jose Espinosa, who's the acting executive director of the Center for Democracy in Americas, and they are a sponsoring organization of this event. Their mission is to create engagement between the U.S. and Cuba. So again, what an incredible way for us to do that, being here, supporting, and being a part of the conversation. Maria, over to you.
Thanks. It's been a wonderful afternoon, and I would like to thank you, Lisette, for moderating such a great panel and for sharing your powerful story. A big thank you to O'Neill, Adriana, Carlos, Cristina. We all learned a lot from your presentations, and we hope that new relationships will arise from today's event. We already saw a lot of feedback and emails and exchanges in the chat, so that's all great. Finally, thank you to everyone who tuned in today, listening and learning from our colleagues on the island, asking great questions and sharing thoughts. We had people from all over the world. We really appreciate your participation. And of course, we look forward to staying in touch and to continuing the conversation. Buenas tardes, good afternoon.
Bye.